Marine reacts to the Legio Custodes, also known as the Adeptus Custodes, by Oculus Imperia. As always, I'm going to be leaving a link to the original video and channel down in the description below, so go ahead and make sure that you check them out. I'm really hoping I got the right video. I did search it up, and Legio and Adeptus is supposed to be essentially the same. They're essentially the same thing from what I saw. So, hoping I got the right video. I'm going to go ahead and just call them Adeptus Custodes just to make it easier on myself. Now, these are supposed to be the tippy top of the Space Marines, but then again, I've also heard that they're kind of their own type deal instead of just Space Marines. I know that they're not as strong as the Primarchs, from what I remember. There was that bit about the Minotaurs, that they had so many die and were able to kill one, and even though it was only one, it was still seen as kind of a big deal, considering the amount of skill that they actually really have. We saw them recently also in the last part of the Grey Knights by Luton09. We saw them kind of jump in to help out the Ultramarines, the Grey Knights that were fighting against, I believe it was Magnus, kind of the devil looking guy with the horn tits for some reason. Also in this video, if there's any moments that are just completely muted, or certain parts that are going to be completely trimmed out, so things might seem kind of weird as far as the pacing a little bit, just know that that's because of a copyright claim on the music. I'm not going to waste too much more time. Let's go ahead and get into the actual video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, it really does help me out a lot. Hit that notification bell right there, or you get notified every time I do upload. Sometimes I'm uploading twice a day, typically working on them now in the evenings and releasing them early the next day. That way when y'all wake up, you have a fresh new video first thing in the morning. So without further ado, let's go ahead and see what the Adeptus Custodes, or Legio Custodes, are all about.
Who can protect the destiny of a species? Who can safeguard the right of mankind to call the stars theirs? Who, ultimately, can be called upon to execute the will of fate incarnate? Some would say the Legiones Astartes are the transhuman pinnacle, or their Primarch progenitors hold claim to that role. They may, in their own fashion, be correct. The Astartes and their gene fathers represent some of the finest characteristics of humanity, but in doing so, also its worst. They are flawed creatures, for we are a flawed species. Their victories and their failures have come to define us as a people. But to whom has the Master of Mankind ever trusted to enact his writ? To whom has he entrusted the very safety of his august personage? Not the Astartes, not even his own Primarch sons. For that honour, the Emperor has his 10,000, his Auric Mortalis. Know then that this is a record of the Chamber Militant of the Imperial household itself, the Legio Custodes.
What? So, are they even like generally considered? Because I've heard some say that they are the top-notch Space Marine type deal, but then I've also seen people in certain videos say that they're not even considered really Space Marines because they're supposed to be so much more stronger, and not as strong as the Primarchs or the Emperor, but a lot stronger than your typical Space Marine. Are these guys kind of like the Grey Knights, in which they kind of have their own little section or special instance? Because the Grey Knights are more with the Inquisition, and they actually answer more directly-ish to the actual Emperor, and these guys are directly below the Emperor, taking whatever he wants them to do, as far as I know. And since this video is about 16 minutes, I'm curious to know if we'll get to see like what you need to do to become one, kind of like how it says in the title, origin and history. How did this all start? Were these one of the very first ones that actually came up back in the day? Anything like that.
The Legio Custodes are the Praetorians of the Emperor himself, golden wardens whose ultimate purpose is the preservation of the life of the Master of Mankind. They are his closest and most trusted servants, those called upon to enact his wishes, and should the need arise, be his most vigilant and merciless executioners. Genetically modified humans surpassing the might of the Legiones Astartes 100-fold, each member of the Custodes represents the apex of the Emperor's scientific, technological, and military genius. In physical might and mental acuity, they are superior to the entire species in every single aspect, with only the Emperor and his Primarchs standing above them in terms of capability.
Did he seriously say that they're 100 times stronger than your typical Space Marine? And he did confirm that they are still below the Primarchs at least, and obviously they're not going to be above the Emperor. In every single capable way, superior. I mean, we did see, at least in the Minotaur video that I saw by Major Kill, was that it took a lot of Minotaurs dying to actually get to be able to kill one, but then that was still considered kind of an unheard thing, or still considered impressive, which really starts to illustrate how just effective they can be.
Few in the Imperium know most anything about the Legio, and fewer still know any details about their history. This humble chronicler counts it amongst the greatest of all honours to be able to impart any information to Imperial record, let alone the histories that shall herein be related. Only upon the most special dispensation of the Imperial household is such a thing possible. The exact origins of the Legio Custodes are, and ever will be, impossible to determine. Only one being in the galaxy knows of it, and he is interred upon his golden throne. All that can be known is pieced together from the earliest of the Unification War records, scraps and fragments preserved after the ruination of the petty Terran kingdoms that committed them to parchment or data slate. All those that survive speak of the Emperor, at that point in history then regarded as simply another Terran warlord, being accompanied by beings of incredible size and abilities. The Black Mane of Nassau, one of the earliest techno-barbarian strongholds to fall to the Emperor, spoke of the Lord of Lightning and his escort of 4 giants in crimson and gold. The Akashic archives of the Northern Hemisphere's Trans-Nordic Alliance...
Wait, so even back then when he said about those 4 giants, were they already genetically enhanced, like with the gene seed from the Emperor at that point? Because when he said giants and in gold armor, are they already the way they are now, or were they just really tall or considered really tall at that time, and were just very skilled? But then later on, they actually ended up genetically enhancing them with the gene seed. But interesting also though that no one knows the origins except for the Emperor, but then he's in the throne. So
spoke of the decisive victory of the Emperor over the Sorceress Mulanan Sen Confederacy, where 30 custodians, as the records call them, led the newly formed Thunder Legion. The records speak of one of these Auric warriors beheading the warp-fueled terror priest Sen himself at the climactic Battle of the Red Frost. Indeed, scant pict captures and vidlogs show that the Custodes were not simply the generals and bodyguards of the Emperor during the Unity era. Towards the end of the conflicts, as Terra was almost totally under the control of the nascent Imperium, the Legio was tasked with the extermination of the remaining Thunder Warriors. Long since grown psychologically unstable due to their crude, if utterly necessary, genetic augmentations, the warriors of the Emperor's first Thunder Legions were put to the spear by the Imperial household, as their instability and the sheer danger they represented to the great work of ruling the homeworld could no longer be tolerated. The Custodes were complemented in committing this bloody task by the newest prototypes of the Emperor's genetic laboratories, Astartes, who would later go on to form the core of the First Legion, Dark Angels.
Hey, Dark Angels. Okay, so, I didn't know the Dark Angels were one of the first ones, or technically be considered the first one. But so the Thunder Warriors, these are the guys that the Emperor was using beforehand during the Unification Wars. And obviously, the reasoning was that they were just completely unstable and not in the way that the Emperor wanted them to be. And I believe he said that at a certain point, they just became intolerable. So he got the Adeptus Custodes to kill them.
What can be gleaned from these records should be immediately obvious. The Custodes are the Emperor's first true-born sons. They predate the Astartes, they predate the Primarchs, and indeed, They even predate the Thunder Warriors, the first genetically enhanced soldiers to be produced en masse by the future Lord of Humanity. The Golden Praetorians have walked in the shadow of him since before humanity even knew their ruler had risen.
The Thunder Warriors were the first ones that were genetically enhanced, but that even the Adeptus Custodes were already there. So were they already at that point, or what was it that made the Emperor actually have them? Like, obviously we don't know where they came from specifically, because it said the only person that knows is, again, the Emperor. Does anybody have like any theory or any idea of where they may have came? Were those first four that were with him, were they just like a typical custody, which is kind of weird to say typical, but were they just like a custody that was there at the time, or were they four key individuals that had some sort of background information or notoriety? If anybody does know or have a theory on that, I'd be very curious to know down in the comments.
It is a widespread belief amongst those who know of their existence, in actuality as opposed to mythology, that the Legio Custodes are comprised of some form of advanced space marine, that they are simply an upgrade to the Astartes genetic enhancement and organ implantation process, an improved iteration, if you will, upon a widely used formula. This chronicler feels it is the duty of this record to refute this in the strongest possible terms. Such a belief is, if anything, almost insulting. It would be akin to comparing the process of creating a lasgun on a Forge World assembly line to that of a weapon forged by the hand of the Primarch Vulcan himself. For all the genecraft genius that made the Astartes the
Did you say Vulcan, right? Stomp.
galaxy-conquering superhumans they are, the process of creating one of the Legio Custodes is vastly more intricate, complex, and ill-understood. Indeed, it is believed only the Emperor himself knows the true depths to which the process extends, although the continued, if painstakingly slow rebuilding of the Custodes, in this recent aftermath of the Great Heresy, has put paid to that understanding. Regardless, while the Astartes conversion procedure is well known and well documented amongst the learned of the Imperium, that of the Custodes is kept under strictest injunction, simply because, as with all things concerning the Legio, it is ultimately the business of the imperial household alone, and thus in possession of an authority none but the Emperor himself can gainsay.
Hold on. Based on that, and I could be completely wrong. From what I understood, is that they had tabletop pieces for the Custodes, but that their background, or if they even had a background, wasn't there. So I feel like the reason, because I've heard people say that they didn't really have a background in the beginning, but then after a while they started fleshing out their backstory and everything. Is that why everything is considered so secret, or that only the Emperor knows? And then, because then again, that would work. Because if they didn't have a background and left that kind of open, then that would leave quite a bit of wiggle room to actually talk about them. And obviously, since they're really high up, it'd be obvious, right, that they would keep a lot of the stuff they do secret. And that there's, in this case, only the Emperor seems to know a lot of the important or crucial information. So I'm assuming this was probably done by, in terms of just fitting what was already there. So I guess, since there wasn't any background in the beginning, now they're adding background, but they're keeping it very secretive. At least, that's what I'm thinking.
What is known, though, marks the process out as being highly singular in comparison to the Legiones Astartes. Of note, to begin with, is that the process itself begins at a much earlier age. While the hormonal and physical nature of an adolescent male is necessary for the creation of mature Astartes, a member of the Custodes begins his development in childhood, as early as considered possible, and well before puberty. The practice of elevating a human to Custodes level is as total as it is subtle, said to be performed at a microscopic level of the genomic structure. There is no surgical implantation. Unlike their Astartes cousins, no such crude procedures are enforced upon the Custodes, for the gene smithing and alchemistry is wrought upon the smallest possible arrangements of their body over a period of decades, and is lightly tailored specifically to each individual. The level to which it elevates the human being in question has prompted some scholars to speculate as to the possibly metaphysical aspect of the method, that perhaps the Emperor himself employed some form of his psychic power in their creation in order to perform genetic manipulation on a level impossible to mere human science. This would indeed help to account for their singular nature and the closeness to which they are bound to the Emperor himself. It is widely known that the selection process for an individual to become an Astartes is strict, requiring candidates of superior biological, physical, and mental strength. The same process for the Custodes is almost incalculably more rigorous. Such is the criteria for induction to the Legio that only one candidate in potentially millions can even begin the procedure, and surviving the decades of genetic and alchemical manipulation is hardly guaranteed.
All right, so when he mentioned the restrictions, did he mean as far as the actual training itself? And that obviously, like say right now, right, when he said 1 in 1 million might be able to actually start the actual training, or did he mean like as far as the recruitment? Because from what I heard so far in the past, also that they'll take a lot, like say millions, and only a small fraction are going to pass. And I mean, I'm pretty sure he was just talking about the actual training itself, as far as it's insanely difficult, and that's why it's heavily restricted. And again, that only, say for custody, 1 in a million would probably make it, and then you would have to go through all those years following afterwards.
Despite the heaving billions of humanity, the numbers of the Legiones Astartes at their zenith never surpassed more than 1 million, and this is with the aid of a process that had been as streamlined and, dare one say it, industrialized as possible. Given all their elevation required and the sheer, almost crippling limitations placed upon their creation, the numbers of the Legio Custodes could simply never rise to that of the Astartes. Indeed, their oft-repeated sobriquet, the 10,000, is a rather literal representation of this, as their numbers are believed to have never risen past this number, and are known to have been diligently maintained to this goal. There remain similarities, at the most basic level, between the Space Marines and the Emperor's custodians, but the differences cannot be understated. The physical prowess of both is elevated beyond those possible by baseline human limits, to be faster, stronger, and hardier, but the Custodes exceed their genetic cousins in every single aspect of this, save perhaps sheer adaptability. The psychosomatic conditioning undertaken by both also diverges. Both are mentally restructured to have their very being rechanneled towards aggression, loyalty to authority figures, and completion of goals and duties, with baser desires being rendered inert by their biological inability and mental lack of desire to procreate. But whereas the Astartes are wrought to conquer, to destroy, those of the 10,000 are for a different purpose: tireless attentiveness and peerless perception. As the Praetorians of the Master of Mankind himself, it is the ultimate goal of every member of the Legio to...
Before you get any further, as far as we were talking about that, say your typical Space Marine is to go conquer, destroy, or kill. For them, it was more perception, and I don't know, it was very difficult with the wording he was using for me, but I was also really glad that he actually made that difference because for example, say in the Marines, right, you have O3s, which is for the infantry. We have an 0311, which which was a rifleman, and you had assaultmen, you had mortarmen, you had machine gunners, and like for machine gunner it was an 0331 from what I believe, and I'm not remembering the other ones right now. I think assaultman was like 52. In any case, we all do very different jobs, and for example, for us, we're supposed to be, for 0311s, we're supposed to be kind of a little jack of all trades, masters at none. We would work with mortars for call for fire, learning how to call in mortars. We would learn some machine guns, not only on the 240, 249s, but also, which actually I think the 249, I don't even think we use that one anymore. I mean, at least in my experience, they kept on jamming. We would learn about the 50, the Mark 19, not a whole lot with the Assaultmen. We would focus more, at least in room clearing, for example. And sometimes, and you would see it during training too, where you would have some people that were attached to you, say some comm guys as well, and you're going through a little mount town in training, And even though they're supposed to be doing some of the same things as far as clearing and all that, you can really see the difference, I guess, in the way that we move and flow. But yeah, essentially all part of the same team, but we all have like our own different, I guess you want to call it objective or different skill or specialty.
To preserve the life of the Emperor by any means necessary. Whatever other tasks they are set, wherever the imperial household assigns them, it is their definitive goal, and governs how the Legio operates in every aspect. Throughout their creation, and indeed, after they take their place among the 10,000, those of the Custodes hone themselves to perfection in all things. Continual training in the martial arts, combined with their almost godlike physical prowess, renders each custodian an almost unstoppable killing machine, a warrior of simply peerless ability, and army unto himself. Combined with this, however, is the sheer mental acuity of each. Through the Emperor's own secret arts, the Custodes possess eidetic memories, filled over the years of elevation, training, and service with all conceivable knowledge in the arts of death-dealing. The threats to the imperial personage are manifold, and can come from any angle at any time. It is the role of the Custodes to anticipate this, step into the mind of the assassin, the recidivist, the heretic, and predict how to stop him before he even strikes. To this end, members of the 10,000 have created the Blood Games, wherein selected custodians serve as enemy combatants tasked with the infiltration of the Imperial Palace upon Terra itself, utilizing their full range of abilities to probe the household's defenses so that they may be better adapted. This wide array of training and stunning mental aptitude allows the Custodes to perform roles far beyond the capabilities of an Astartes. Over the course of the Great Crusade, the Legio were bodyguards, emissaries, imperial representatives, assassins, generals, and when needed, the most lethal warriors and executioners at the Emperor's disposal. That being said, the 10,000 were rarely called upon for active military service, as each is a genetic treasure beyond worth, possibly the single most valuable human resource in the entire Imperium. Their presence was scant, but did leave an indelible mark upon the history of the Great Crusade. Upon whatever world they strode, the Oramite-clad perfect warriors of the Legio did so bearing the ultimate writ, the authority of the Emperor himself. None, even the Primarchs of the Legiones Astartes, could gainsay the orders of a custodian. The Lex Ultima, the true law of the Master of Mankind, saw the Legio delegated to only the most vital of roles, and deployed only in the most dire of circumstances. Notable engagements during the Crusade included the pacification of Ophelia VII, where 100 members of the Legio supplemented over 10,000 of the 7th Legion Imperial Fists. One of the largest Crusade-era actions for the Custodes was the Battle of Gyros Thravian during the middle stages of the Ulanor campaign, where the forces of 3 Astartes legions and 3 Primarchs were being held at bay by the greenskin forces of the war boss Garkul Blackfang. On the verge of
Garkul Blackfang. Hold on. I have no idea how to spell that. Garkul Blackfang. That's another orc I should check out then. So from what I got from what he was saying was that these guys are above the law, in a sense. So anywhere that they would be designated to go, boom, that's it. Whatever they say kind of goes. I wonder. I mean, I know the Minotaurs have gone against them, which obviously didn't end very well for them. But has any other Space Marine ever tried? I mean, it's highly unlikely, I think. But then again, I do remember people saying that there's sometimes friction in between chapters, and that I wonder if any other Space Marine chapter had actually, I guess, tried to take on a Custody, whether it was to actually kill them, maybe just like a little sparring match. Also, they mentioned that they do martial arts, so I wonder what kind of martial arts they typically do, considering that they're lugging around this big armor the majority of the time.
Of defeat, the legions were rescued by the Emperor himself at the fore of 1,000 custodians, a number unheard of in active service for a single battle. The Legio proved its total effectiveness, slaughtering an estimated 100,000 orcs with the loss of only 3 of their own, whose names the Emperor is said to have personally engraved into his own armour. At the conclusion of the Ulanor campaign, the Emperor retired to Terra to oversee his greatest work, and the Custodes, as ever, were by his side. They would be a rare sight in the galaxy at large during the last years before the Great Heresy, especially under arms and in any sort of numbers, with one sole, dread exception, the Battle of Prospero. But that is a record too great and terrible to relate for now, and simply must wait for another time. For the perfect firstborn of our Lord, the Emperor of mankind, myth, legend, and retelling rarely do their accomplishments or sheer existence any justice. We can simply remember the glory of the men and deeds that were, and offer what thanks we can to these tireless watchmen of the destiny of our species.
Alright, let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. So, again, got a lot about what I wanted to say during the video. Just that very last little section. When he said 1,000 Custodes came in, right? To help the 3 Primarchs, and I don't remember what Space Marines he said specifically, but they were going against the Orcs, and that when they came in 1,000 strong, and then took out 100,000 Orcs, approximately, and they only lost 3. So if you divide 100,000 by 1,000, you get 100. So, which, considering everything I've heard about them so far, it's pretty understandable that they'd be able to kill them. But then again, I don't know what kind of battle this was. If it was so chaotic, but they still only took 3. I don't know. There's just something with the numbers that always just astounds me, and it's really always hard to try to put into your head as far as to what happened or what is happening. And lastly, I just wanted to also really hit on, as far as the origin, the only person that really knows is the Emperor. Again, I said it in the video that I've heard a lot during the tabletop that they were always there, but they never had a real backstory. And I guess that was also in terms to let it happen later on in the future, where they could actually start implementing some backstory. I don't think they figured out maybe possibly what to put as their backstory, or like specifically origins. And it just came up to being like, well, hey, the Emperor knows. But I mean, the Emperor's in the throne, so I guess at this point at least we're kind of left to our own our own imagination as to how and where they actually came from. That's gonna go ahead and do it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, really does help me a lot. Hit that dislike button if you didn't like it. Helps me improve the channel. If you're gonna see what's coming up next, check the description down below. You guys see a list of about 5 videos. Top to bottom is gonna be how I view them. But until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.